The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 222.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Bravehearty.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Physician healers. Wearing a bit thin. Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 11th Doctor story, titled Let's Kill Hitler. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. Folks, we really appreciate it when you take a moment to go and write a review of the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from. And when you share it with your friends to help us grow our community of listeners and reach more people. We're growing all the time. We're so grateful that you're helping us to grow. We're always seeing new listeners come along, and the downloads keep going up, which is great. One thing I want to mention also at this time, because someone mentioned it in our social media, that to remind you that you can often get the Big Finish and even some of the audio versions of televised classic Doctor Who on Spotify. If you search on Spotify for Doctor Who, for either Big Finish Doctor Who or just Doctor Who in a specific title, you might be able to listen to it there for free without having to buy it. So definitely check that out before you go buying it online. That's one of our tips. But today we're talking about the episode Let's Kill Hitler. This was the premiere of the second half of the second of the 11th Doctor seasons.
The mid-season premiere.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm trying to figure out how best to say that. But there was a gap of about 3 months from June to the end of August when this episode aired. And I'm not sure, this was the first time in New Who that they did a mid-season gap like that. I'm not sure why they decided to do it. Probably just ease of production. The premise, the recap for this is the Doctor left off with the Good Man Goes to War, where with Melody Pond, the baby has been abducted by the eye patch lady.
Yeah, Madame Covarian, and River has revealed to the Doctor who she is, the fact that, and to Amy and Rory, that she's their daughter, and as a result, the Doctor has gone off to find the baby, and River has been left to take Amy and Rory back to Earth. Why they don't all go together, I don't know, but they don't.
Right. Now, the interesting thing about this, where we go from here, is all of that stuff that happened at the beginning of the season with the silence and going back to 1969, that all happens, it sort of happens before this episode in that interim period. In other words, the child Melody is, being held by the silence, on Earth at Cape Canaveral in 1969. And then she has that regeneration on the streets of New York City at the end of those two episodes and goes from there. And that's where that all happens prior to this part picking up, this mid-season premiere. So I thought that was a little confusing the first time I saw it, but in retrospect now I understand what's all going on.
Well,
so
it doesn't help much when you have such a long break between the first episode of the season and then this episode, where it was, a significant period of time where you'd forget, oh yeah, we did see that first regeneration start.
Exactly. And we don't see it complete.
No, but they tell us what she ended up as in this episode. Also, she's regenerated at least twice before. Mm-hmm. Because from her baby form, there was apparently a regeneration before she regenerated as a little girl in New York, because she mentions when she's regenerating in that episode, she mentions this has happened before. So actually, River is the fourth incarnation of this child.
Interesting. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Because she specifically, she was a toddler when it first happened.
Right. Right.
And then she says in this episode she ended up as a toddler in New York.
Right.
Yes. Although she was a little older than that, but yeah.
No. The one we didn't see.
Oh, I see.
Was a toddler, and that's to explain why when we meet her in this episode, she doesn't appear older than she is.
I see what you're saying. Yes, that's right. How a toddler got from New York City alone to England is a whole nother question, but we don't know, which was I don't think anyone can answer.
No, they glossed over that by saying it took me years of searching for you.
Yes, as a toddler.
Well, as a kid, yeah.
Yeah, as a kid. So, but a couple things we get in this episode, that is, we find out why the Silence was trying to kill the Doctor in the first episode of the season. We get the introduction of the Tesselecta, which I have to say is is a really neat science fiction device. I kind of really like this idea of the Lilliputian nano transforming robot, run by a bunch of people, in and out style. Or is it called In and Out? No, what's that? The
Inside Out.
Inside Out. Sorry, In and Out. I'm thinking of burgers for right now.
He must be hungry.
Inside Out style, which I think is a clever device. What do you think?
Well, I think it taps onto a basic childhood fantasy. I know I had, imagined what it would be like to, essentially have little people inside running, your body and stuff like that and doing things. That seems to me to be a fairly common childhood scenario. And this actualizes it. Also, the reason it's called the Tesselecta, although they don't explain it, is because tessellation is the arrangement of tiles to completely cover a surface. And when the Tesselecta transforms from one form to another, you have this visual effect where a bunch of tiles, little square tiles, flip over to reveal the new form.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. My kids play with the Tessellect tiles, actually. So I didn't make that connection.
Well, it's interesting with this ship. It's like the opposite of the TARDIS. The TARDIS is bigger on the inside. Well, now on this, everything inside of it is smaller on the inside.
That's true. That's true.
But one thing I don't know if you hear much anymore. I mean, not around little kids as much as others might be. But I remember as a kid thinking there were little people in the radio. I think we all kind of had that point where it was like, oh yeah, there's little people in the radio who are talking to us when you turn on the radio. Yes. And this kind of literally says, well, there's literally little people inside this device.
Yeah.
I imagined for a record player that I had when I was very, very small that there were people in a studio somewhere that were performing what was on the record, and I just didn't know how they knew when I dropped the needle it was time to start.
I love that fact that when we're kids, we have these, we develop these explanations for how the world works, and it's just fascinating. These clever ideas, the people that live in the TV, and where do things go down the drain.
And sometimes we find out the truth, and we find out the truth is actually cooler than we thought, and sometimes we find out the truth and we're very disappointed.
Yes.
Just imagine what our pets must think of these things, because they don't have the ability to learn the concept of recording.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, I've seen dogs and cats freak out at stuff on the TV, which is that's true. One of the things we also get in this is the first on-screen complete regeneration of a female Time Lord. I mean, obviously, we see the beginning of a regeneration for the little girl in the previous episode, but this one we go that complete from Mel's to River.
We also see Romana's regeneration back in Classic Who, part of it.
Part of it, right,
yep.
Yes.
And it's really weird.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. So one of the things I got out of this episode was the Amy and Rory as parents, and weirdest, finding out you're a parent ever, they don't get to raise their own daughter. They don't get to raise their own child. They miss her childhood.
Yeah, they also sort of try to patch that. So maybe we should explain what happens in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
As it starts, it's been all summer, and Amy and Rory have not heard from the doctor, and so they're doing this crazy stunt in a car, making a crop circle in a field in Ledworth, and it's the word doctor. with the second O in Doctor being a big, completely flattened crop circle. And so they are racing around at the beginning of the episode. We don't know what they're doing, but they're making this crop circle. And by the time they get to the big O that they've pre-flattened, the Doctor and the TARDIS are already there. And then, and the Doctor shows them tomorrow's newspaper that has an aerial photo of this, and it just says Doctor. And he's like, come on, really? And they say, well, you weren't answering your phone. And then Rory notices that there's a line drawn through the word Doctor in the photograph. And it's like, we didn't do that. And all of a sudden, a second really hot red sports car comes screaming up to the TARDIS. And a person we've never met before named Mel's gets out of the sports car. And we quickly learn that Mel's is like Amy and Rory's best friend. She knows all about the Doctor from the stories that Amy has been telling since she was a little girl. And there are police that are hot on her trail because even though she says that the red hot sports car is mine-ish, and they tell her she's got to stop doing this or she'll end up in jail, and she demands that they take off, and she's got a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And it's loaded. And the Doctor says, well, where do you want to go? And she says, well, you've got a time machine, I've got a gun, let's kill Hitler. And so we're off and running to 1938 before World War II started, because it started in 1939.
Right.
When they get to 1938, the viewer finds that there's this giant futuristic robot from the future called the Tesselecta that is exterminating Nazi war criminals. And it goes to do Hitler next, but then they realize that Hitler is not at the end of his timeline because it's only 1938 and he doesn't die till 1945. So as they're getting ready to move to the future, the TARDIS comes crashing into the Reichschancellery, and the Doctor and River and the Doctor and Mel's and Amy and Rory come pouring out because River has just used her gun to shoot the interior of the TARDIS, and it's leaking smoke. And the Doctor is going, why did you shoot my TARDIS? And Mel's is saying, it's your fault. You said we were in a state of temporal grace and guns couldn't work. So she was just testing that. And he's like, that was a clever lie. Anyone could see that was a clever lie. And this is harking back to the fifth Doctor having said exactly the same thing, even though they later showed guns working in his TARDIS.
Which we just saw in Arc of Infinity, right?
Right. So they get out, and Hitler thanks them for saving his life, which unnerves the Doctor. But he tries to shoot the robot, the Tesselecta. He doesn't know it's a robot. He thinks it's a guy. He tries to shoot it. He misses and hits Mel's. Meanwhile, the Doctor has Rory lock Hitler in a cupboard, and he's out of the plot at that point. He never comes back except maybe for some banging on the door.
Right.
And so Mel's becomes the focus, and we've seen a flashback of her growing up with Amy and Rory, and she's a very spunky, gets in trouble all the time, but fun person, kind of like River Song. And now that she's been shot, she regenerates into River Song. And so she grew up with them all along, and she even says to them, you did get to raise me. Right. Not really, but she grew up beside them. And so River is in regeneration madness. She has a Time Lord's immediate fixation on new clothing after a regeneration. She and the Doctor have a kind of flirty interaction where she's trying to kill him. And finally she kisses him. And that's what does it. It's poison lipstick. Her lipstick has the poison of the Judas tree in it. And there's no cure. His regeneration is disabled. He's going to be dead in just over 30 minutes. Maybe not even time to get a pizza there. And so she goes running off through the city to do crazy regeneration things, and everybody follows her and tries to repair the situation. And eventually she sacrifices all of her future regenerations to save the Doctor. The end.
The end. Which is interesting. So we could go back through some of that and cover that. But let's get to the regenerations at the end, because I have a thought about that. So yes, she is they're a friend from childhood, and she's a troublemaker. And there's some interesting kind of fun little interactions between younger Mel's, young Rory, who is just adorable as a little scrawny little kid, and Amelia Pond, because I love that little girl whenever she shows up as Amelia. She's so great as young Amy, and she's so clueless about Rory. Amy is, whether she was young or even when she's a grown up, she was so clueless about that he would be interested in her at all.
Well, and you got young Rory is, I mean, he's the quiet nerd. I mean, he's just kind of there. And, there's the scene where, we were playing hide and seek 2 hours ago. You never came to find me.
Poor Rory.
Things like that. He's just kind of there. But yeah, it is interesting now. He's really interested in Amy, and Amy just has absolutely no clue until all of a sudden, as Mel says, the penny drops, or we'd say here in the States, the light bulb turned on.
Right.
You got a clue.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing. Amy doesn't think that Rory likes girls. And she's like, well, I've never seen you show any interest in any girl. And he's like, yeah, sure. Like, duh. Because he's been showing interest in you.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting, but like I said before, it's kind of heartbreaking a little bit to that they didn't get to raise their own child, their own daughter. And on the other hand, they know her. They know that she grows up and that she's she does end up in prison. They know that much too. But that she's a smart, capable, heroic person as an adult. So there's that. But it's an interesting time traveler conundrum, isn't it? To have to deal with. I'm not sure how I would deal with that.
We also have another Bootstrap Paradox. So River's birth name was Melody Pond, and she was named after Amy's best friend Mel's, which is short for Melody. So as the Doctor points out, you named your daughter after your daughter.
Yeah.
Paradox. So the Tesselecta is interesting. It comes from something called the Justice Department.
We have that here in America.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it supposed to be some futuristic version of it's
some futuristic Justice Department. I don't think it's meant to be the American one.
I wonder if it's the same organization that Captain Jack worked for before he went rogue.
Oh,
the same temporal agency, because he was like a temporal agent.
Yeah.
And went rogue. And I wonder if it's meant to be the same or just another one that's out there somewhere. Who knows?
I mean, hypothetically, they could explain it as being the same, but it seems to be significantly different in its purposes and methods, because the time agents that Captain Jack worked for, they traveled by vortex manipulator as individuals to repair the timeline, I think. Whereas this is not interfering with the timeline significantly, but they're traveling in giant robots, or actually life-size robots, as a group to torture prominent criminals just before they die and or kill them.
Right.
That's the interesting part about this, is they're not trying to prevent the war crimes that they commit, which would change their timeline of history that they know. But what they go to the end of their lifespan, and then and as they say, give them hell, literally. Whereas they punish them in a hellish manner with a torturous way.
Yeah, but there's an inconsistency. There's a lot of clever stuff in the writing of this episode, but there's a big inconsistency when it comes to what the Justice Department actually does. Because we see what happens to the first guy they do, who's some random Nazi war criminal. Yeah. And then we see it repeatedly implied what would happen to other people if they didn't stop it from happening. And it's all the same thing. They've got inside the robot, they've got these robotic jellyfish-like antibodies. And if you're not authorized to be there, they will kill you. And I love the polite dialogue.
Very
that they
politely,
have. Yeah. It's like you are unauthorized, and your existence will now be terminated. You will experience a slight tingling sensation and then death. And so that's like, we see that happen to the Nazi war guy. We see that implied is this would happen to everybody else in the Tesselecta who doesn't have proper credentials unless it was stopped. And then at some point, the commander of the Tesselecta tells the Doctor, we don't kill them, we give them hell. And they proceed to do that to River. They've got her in a force field, and suddenly the force field changes to be red, and it looks like hellish flames licking over her body and tormenting her. And okay, we didn't see that for anybody else. This is only her, and you did kill people. You let the antibodies kill them.
Right.
So there's a major inconsistency in the writing about what actually they're doing. Because if they'd done what they'd done to the war criminal, they would have just miniaturized River, let her be in the eyeball of the robot where people come in and out, and then let the antibodies kill her.
No, wait. You're saying there's inconsistency in the Stephen Moffat plot? That's unheard of.
Just a touch. Just this once.
I like Stephen Moffat. Some of his writing is phenomenal, but he doesn't always have the most tight plots. Let's just put it that way.
Some of the dialogue in this episode is really clever. I really enjoy it. But yeah, you're right. That you could headcanon around it, this problem, but it is a problem. But I do want to repeat like that. I love the antibody line. Welcome. You are unauthorized. Your death will now be implemented. I just love how welcoming that is.
Remain calm while your life is extracted.
Now, they do this thing with it where they identify the TARDIS first. They're like, okay, the TARDIS is here. You know what that means? We have the biggest war criminal of all is the biggest, human rights criminal or whatever it is we're looking for of all is here. And now we're thinking, oh, the Doctor, because Good Man Goes to War, said he was, a bad guy. And then they say, no, we find out it's actually River who is the bad guy that they're looking for.
And this is a typical Stephen Moffat fake out. Like, is it going to be the Doctor or Rory?
Yeah, exactly.
And that Amy's going to love. And that isn't going to be the Doctor or Rory who's the baby's father. And is it the Doctor or River who's the time criminal and stuff?
Right. Well, right. And they even say her, and of course, watching now with 13, everybody's going, "Wait, what did 13 do to become a war criminal?"
Right. Well, no, not her. It was Dr. Ruth who was the female war criminal, right? Because the Jadoon were looking for her. That's an interesting parallel. So, she's trying to kill the Doctor because she's been programmed by the Silence to attack him. That was the message from the previous episode. That's River has been turned into a weapon to kill the Doctor. So that's why she's going after him.
And now we get some more information about who the Silence is. The Silence, we are told by the Tesselecta people, is a religious organization that it's not a race. It's a religious organization, and their primary organizing principle is that silence will fall when the question is asked, and we don't know what the question is. But it's the oldest question in the universe, hidden in plain sight, and for some reason, the answer to the question must never be uttered.
Right. Which is where we will get resolution for the season-long story arc at the end of the season in the final episode, and find out how the Doctor survives Lake Silencio. So yes, that was interesting to find out that the Silence is not that species, that creepy species,
right?
That the Doctor
exterminated.
Yeah,
more than just the weird dudes in the suits.
Yeah. So you mentioned that she poisons him with the fruit of the Judas tree, which I find an interesting reference to the gospel.
Mm-hmm. Do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? Yeah.
Yes. I think it evokes the image of the Joshua tree, which is an earth plant, that we have in the American Southwest. But Judas tree is an interesting idea. I'm kind of curious what Moffat was thinking with that. Beyond that, like, because Judas died hanging from a tree, he hung himself from a tree.
Oh, so, I assume it was just, it's just clearly a reference to Judas, but
yeah.
In terms of Joshua tree, now, I don't know that this is where the name for that comes from. I rather doubt it. So in the biblical languages, the word for tree and the word for wood are the same thing. and at least frequently it is. And so that's why you have references to Jesus being hung on a tree. And because the cross is made of wood, and the Hebrew name Yeshua comes into English more than one way. It can come in as Jesus, it can come in as Jason via Greek, or it can come in directly from Hebrew as Joshua. And so I have wondered about the etymology of the name Joshua tree. Could it be a reference to the cross? Even though Joshua trees don't look like crosses.
Right. I would think a saguaro cactus should have been named a Joshua tree, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
But I did think that the whole Judas tree thing was
clearly tied in. Yeah,
tie in.
Definitely clear imagery that he's trying to pull on, even on a surface level.
Now the Doctor is dying, and he staggers into the TARDIS, where he calls up a voice interface. So it's a visual voice interface that looks like Amelia Pond, the young. After we see several iterations as.
Oh, the iterations are really great. First, it's he activates the voice interface. It puts up a hologram of the 11th Doctor himself, and it's like, no, someone I like. So it puts up Rose Tyler, and he says guilt. And then it puts up Martha Jones, and he says, guilt. And it puts up Donna Noble, and he says, more guilt. Isn't there someone in the universe I haven't ruined yet? And it puts up young Amy.
Right. Now, that's an interesting thought that he had, like, young Amy, as opposed to current Amy, like, at her current age.
Kind of ruined her.
Yeah.
By abandoning her as a child.
Right. So he didn't ruin young Amy, but he kind of ruined adult Amy or something along those lines, which I think is an interesting question. The answer to his problem, she says, is fish fingers and custard.
I didn't take it that way. No.
So what is the fish fingers and custard? Because I was confused by that.
Yeah. So he's trying to get an answer to. The first thing he says is like, "What's my prognosis?" And she says, "You'll be dead in 32 minutes." And he's like, "Oh, you're so Scottish. You're ignoring the 31 minutes. I'll be perfectly fine." And she says, "You'll be fine for 31 minutes. You'll be dead in 32 minutes." So I need to regenerate, is what you're saying. Regeneration is unavailable. You will be dead in 32 minutes. And so what's the cure? There is no cure. You will be dead in 32 minutes. And he's starting to hallucinate a little bit, thinking this is the real Amy. And he at one point proposes, "Let you and me fly off and have adventures." So he's shifting back and forth between thinking this is the real little Amy and a voice interface. And she keeps telling him, "I'm not Amy. I'm a voice interface."
Right.
And he says, "I can be brave for you, Amy. Tell me how to do that." And she says, "I'm not Amy, I'm a voice interface." And then after a pause, she says, "Fish fingers and custard." And that gives him courage.
Okay.
And gets him up on his feet and moving again.
Okay, so the fish fingers and custard reminds him of that time when he was brave for her and helped her.
Right. Later in another episode, we'll have the adult Amy swear to him by fish fingers and custard. So this is moment is deeply moving to him.
Okay.
Right. Also, he has a really he keeps talking about how Scottish she is as a kind of othering. He's othering her.
Uh-huh.
Just like he does with the adult Amy later, or actually the Tesselecta in the form of Amy when he calls it a big giant
ginger. Yeah.
Yeah. But the most inexplicable to me thing about this othering that he's doing with the image of Amy is, he said, after he's been going on about how Scottish she is, he says, "Scotland's never conquered anywhere, not even a Shetland." And it's like, where is this coming from? How is this? I mean, it's clearly supposed to be funny on the writing level, but I don't find it funny. And I don't know what Stephen Moffat's trying to do here. I mean, I understand he's trying to be funny, but I don't understand how this is supposed to work as a joke and not simply be an insult that makes the Doctor look small.
Yeah. I wonder if we're missing, obviously, some very strong cultural context, not being in the UK. Because I know the Scots, stereotypical Scots are very hot-tempered. They're also very proud.
And having a martial tradition.
Yes.
Yeah, and having martial. So I think there's kind of that. This is like the English kind of pushing back at the Scots.
Yeah.
But we don't see it, of course, here in the United States because we're much more mixed culture that we don't have quite that background to pull from. Even people who are Scottish descent here, it's more of a matter of I'm Scottish, I'm Irish, I'm whatever. You've got a temper.
It's kind of like the rest of the country and New Yorkers.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah. One of the things I love about this scene with the implacability and imperturbability of the Amelia Pond Hollow interface, he says, "I can't die now. River's only just beginning." And she says, "You will not die now. You will die in 32 minutes." I just love, it's very literal, very clear. No. You are not dying now. You are dying in 32 minutes. And it just goes on and on. I do like that.
Well, I think it was a great scene. I missed the opportunity to have the doctor's wife figure come back at that point.
Idris.
But it was a cool scene. I mean, it was a great scene, but it would have been cool to see that too.
That would have been cool. So you mentioned that there's a scene in a restaurant. River went in and basically robbed all the Nazis who are dining there and takes all the clothes so she can try them on because regenerated Time Lords apparently are very concerned about their clothing, like you mentioned.
By the way, notice there's a string quartet playing in the restaurant. Either of y'all notice what they were playing?
No.
It was Vivaldi's Spring from the Four Seasons.
Oh, I should have recognized that. My daughter has been
here
playing that on repeat a lot lately.
I love Vivaldi. I should have noticed that too.
Yes.
I noticed the stereotypical monocle dropping in the soup.
Yes.
It's because one guy's eye holds up and the monocle drops.
Yeah, it's a little surprising it wasn't Wagner or something, or like some German composer. But
well, they're trying to show the elegance of Berlin before the war.
Okay.
And in fact, River has a line earlier as she's about to go shopping where she says, she kind of stands up in a window of the Reichschancellery and looks out on the city, and it's like, Berlin just before the war, a whole world just about to tear itself apart, my kind of town or something like that.
Yep.
Right. So the River's in there, and then as Amy and Rory go in, they follow her in. Then the Amy-shaped Tesselecta goes in, miniaturizes Amy and Rory, so they end up inside. Rory has a great line here. Okay, I'm trapped inside a giant robot replica of my wife. I'm really trying not to see this as a metaphor.
Yeah.
It's just so great. I love
which
that.
Is an outstanding line. And then he explains to Amy that they were brought in by a miniaturization ray. And she's like, "How do you know that?" And he says, "Well, there was a ray and we miniaturized."
That makes sense. They're attacked by the antibodies, like the others. "Welcome, you are unauthorized. Prepare to be terminated." But then they're saved at the last second by the crew because they are not guilty of anything, and so they're being saved. It's an interesting character moment to kind of define who the crew of the Tesselect is, and this will be important going forward in the season. For later on in the season, these are not indiscriminate barbarian executors wiping out anyone who gets in their way. They're really on justice. Now, whether justice is capital punishment without a trial for everyone that you deem guilty is a whole nother question. But they are about justice, not the ends justifying the means in the sense of taking out innocence, I guess is what I'm saying. So I thought that was interesting. So
they're
that's
not
when
bad guys.
They're not right. Thank you. You said that much clearer than I did. The doctor shows up. TARDIS lands. He comes out in his tux and top hat and tails. The whole top hat and tails, like at the wedding, Amy and Rory's wedding.
And they hang a lantern on that. River is like, "You're dying and you change, and you always change when you don't have time. Time is not the boss of you." I like that because he's given his sonic screwdriver to Amy, and she's got it on the Tesselecta. But he needs a device to scan the Tesselecta with, and he's got a sonic cane, which only appears in this one episode, as far as I know. And it is great. I don't mind him having a sonic cane. It is way better than the sonic shades.
Yeah. I mean, the sonic Fender guitar would have been cool. That would have been,
Well, come on now.
Mileage may vary.
I'm just kidding.
Fender guitar, by definition, is sonic. It makes sound. Let's be clear about this.
I'm teasing. So, Amy's got the regular sonic, which is important because she's going to use it in a bit inside the Tesselecta. But the doctor is trying to stop them from taking River, which is kind of a conundrum for these guys inside the Tesselecta. Like, no, she killed you. We're trying to bring justice to her for your murder. And he's like, I don't want you to do that. I'm not dead yet, which is a nice Monty Python, perhaps.
Oh, yeah.
He does want information about what's going on, though, and they say our database is not open to the public. But because Amy is River's mother and they're after River, Amy is family and thus has privileges and can get information out of the database. And so Amy uses her privileges around this HIPAA privacy policy or whatever it is to get information to the doctor about who the silence is and what's going on.
Yeah, the doctor does say to them, it said, well, at least I'm not a time-traveling, shape-shifting robot operated by miniaturized cross people, which I've got to admit I did not see coming, he says. Yeah, that's an interesting thing, is like, because Amy she's next of kin, I guess, or along those lines, she gets that access. And the doctor, like, she kills the doctor. And so the doctor is on the verge of finding out about Lake Silencio, which he does. At this point. But the question then is, if she's being punished for killing the doctor at Lake Silencio, why are they doing it here and not at Lake Silencio?
They gloss over that because you have one of the bridge crew on the Tesselecta pointing out that he doesn't die here, he dies at Lake Silencio, and that's a fixed point. So he must always die there, and they just ignore what they're doing with River at this point.
Right.
Presumably now, on the we don't kill them theory, they could give them hell at any point in their timeline, and she's just made a murder attempt on the doctor.
Right. Yeah, they didn't come here for her. They came for Hitler, but they've encountered her, so they say something along the lines of it's a punishment of opportunity or whatever they want to say.
Right.
So Amy does end up using the sonic to turn off all their privileges on the ship so that the antibodies go after them as a way to get them to stop torturing River.
Yeah, and this is interesting because the doctor at this point is very, very weak. He's on the ground. He can't effectively control his body. He doesn't really have a plan except in the most general terms. And the first step of his plan is he tells Amy and Rory, just save River. And they're like, how are we supposed to do that? Just save River. That's the only thing that matters now is save River. And then they do that by Amy deactivating everybody's privileges. That forces them to stop the procedure against River, and it forces them to evacuate the Tesselecta. They all beam up to their mothership, and that leaves Amy and Rory on the Tesselecta about to be attacked by the antibodies. And so they're cowering, they're saying how much they love each other as they're about to die from the antibodies. Now the doctor moves to the next phase of his plan. Now he tells River, now we have to save your parents. Right. And he has no details on how that's going to happen, but that's the point of the plan. Just save them somehow. And so we cut to inside the eyeball where Amy and Rory are about to be killed, and the TARDIS materializes around them. And they are rejoicing, but then instead of the doctor stepping around the console, it's River. And she says, I can fly it somehow. She showed me how. And it's not clear who the she is. Does she mean Madame Covarian, or does she mean the TARDIS itself showed her how to fly? And she also adds, the doctor says, I'm the child of the TARDIS, which makes me think it's the TARDIS that showed her how to fly.
Right.
But we then get to the outside again, where the doctor's still laying on the restaurant floor dying. And I've described enough, so why don't one of you do some describing?
Yeah.
So, well, what happens at this point is that that the doctor is dying. Amy says, "You I know you don't die here, and because she saw him die at Lake Silencio, so this can't happen. It doesn't make any sense. So the doctor, so River comes over to the doctor, and the doctor whispers something. He gives a message to River Song, but we never hear what it is. But it's enough to make her want to save him.
Well, yeah. So River all this time thinks doesn't realize that she is the River Song that everybody's talking about. She thinks of herself as Melody Pond or Melody something. Her original, the last name presumably wasn't Pond when she was growing up with Amy.
Right.
But she thinks of herself as Melody. She doesn't know who this River is. She's still addled by the regeneration that's keeping the penny from dropping for her. And so the doctor says to Amy and Rory, I need to speak to your daughter for a moment. River comes over. The doctor whispers something. River says, oh, well, I'm sure she knows. And it's like a declaration of love for River. And that's been set up earlier in the episode when the doctor was talking about River and said, as a friend of mine, at one point, based on what he's been saying, River says, oh, more than a friend, I think. Yeah. So she knows whoever River is. It's someone very special to the doctor. I'm sure she knows is, we can infer that was a tell River how much I love her or something. And then he says, find River Song. And she doesn't know who that is. So Amy turns to the robot and says, are you still functioning? Because I'm still family. Show me River Song. And it transforms into River Song. And River, now the penny drops for her. She realizes she is River Song. The doctor deeply loves her. And she goes to him, even though he's just apparently died, and uses her remaining regeneration energy to bring him back to life. Only since this is like new for her, she doesn't know when to stop. And she gives him all of her remaining regeneration energy for all of her future regenerations.
So there's a couple interesting questions that arise here. For one, I'm assuming that when she regenerates from Melody to River, from Mel's to River, that was the trigger for the Manchurian Candidate trigger to kill the doctor, because she doesn't try to kill him before that.
They explain that. The doctor points out to her, why didn't you just kill me in the cornfield? And she says, it wouldn't have been polite. She says, I'm a psychopath. I'm not rude.
Okay. I guess that explains it. Well, the other one is
there's also running away from the cops, and using the TARDIS to get away from the cops.
Right. That's right. So the other thing that raises for me here is there's been this whole question of like the Doctor's 13 regenerations, and we've got the whole timeless child thing that we just dealt with a year ago, and I don't want to. I want to set that aside for the moment and
he
just
doesn't
deal
know
with it.
about that yet.
Yes, as we knew about it at the time. When the Doctor came to the end of this regeneration, as we'll eventually see, the Time Lords give him a whole nother set of regenerations. And that's sort of the explanation for how the show continues. But then this is another possible explanation, right? I mean, she pours, at this point, 6, 7, 8 regenerations worth of energy into him? I mean, they could have used that as an explanation for how he continued on, too, right?
They could have. They just chose not to.
Okay. Just an interesting thought.
Honestly, I think that issue, as far as the Time Lords giving the Doctor more regenerations, was the lazy way on Stephen Moffat's part. Because I think everybody who was a fan of the show basically said at some point they're going to hit regeneration number 13, and they're just going to give them more anyways. I mean, right. I don't think any fan really thought, they're just going to end the show after Matt Smith. So we're done.
Well, Matt Smith quit, so I guess we can't do this anymore. So the episode ends with the River waking up in a hospital at run by the Sisters of the Infinite Schism, which is an interesting name of a religious order, which the Doctor declares the greatest hospital in the universe. And they explain, her regenerations are now gone. Amy and Rory are her parents. The Doctor gives her TARDIS diary.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the fact her regenerations are gone is also important, given that we see River die in Silence at the Library, Forest of the Dead.
Yes, That's true. That's true. yes, so that is a sort of back explanation for why River doesn't regenerate at that point. That's actually a good point. Yeah, he had to do something there. So we end the episode with the Doctor looking at his screen. Well, almost end the episode. The Doctor looking at the screen on the TARDIS with the information about Lake Silencio. And this is the second sort of thing that they've done this sort of thing this season. First, it was the Doctor hiding the information on the screen about Amy's on and off again pregnancy because she was a ganger. Now it's the Doctor hiding from them that he knows about Lake Silencio. I don't know. Is that going back to the well again? You know, the whole I'm withholding information thing. Is that too much?
I don't mind him doing that. The Doctor clearly is always withholding information from his companions.
Right.
Yeah.
But I thought the execution was a little clumsy because when Amy and Rory come up to him and he's got this picture of him there at Lake Silencio, why don't they immediately recognize it?
Right. Yeah.
Well, with all the information of, died on this date at this location and all that right there on the screen, which apparently they didn't see.
Yes. He managed to flick it off. And then the Amy asked a question. Yeah, but how do people? River will come looking for us. Well, how do people even look for you? And the Doctor says, "Oh, Pond, haven't you figured that one out yet?" Well, they kind of did that at the beginning, right? Where they called him, and then we end with River at Luna University in the year 5123, entering the archaeology program at the university, and she's asked why you're becoming an archaeologist. I'm looking for a good man, she says, which is a little bit of a play on, she's getting her MRS degree, which is the thing people used to say. But she's looking for the Doctor, the good man who goes to war. Any last thoughts on this episode? Anything we forgot to cover?
Well, all I can say is I'd love to get that Corvette that Melody was crazy driving through the cornfield. But
beautiful, a Stingray, I think it was. Yeah, beautiful car. Jimmy.
So I really liked the actress who plays Mel's at the beginning of the episode. I wish we had seen a lot more of her. I think it's sad that they didn't introduce her, at least at the beginning of this season. Because she's just great, and she anticipates River wonderfully. You can see the continuity of personality between the two characters, much more so than even some of the shifts in the personality the Doctor has had.
Yeah.
And so I just like her a lot. I wish there had been more of her.
I agree.
Because we only get a little bit of screen time with her and she's gone. And it's like, oh, come on. This is such a great character. I would just love more of this. I like the way she has kind of, as soon as she meets the Doctor, she has this kind of flirty thing going on with him. As she's dying from the gunshot wound, the Doctor says, "You stay alive and I'll marry you."
Yes.
And she says, "Don't you think you better ask my parents first?" And so I'll ask them first thing. Well, she's like, "Well, they're right here."
Right.
That penny in the air, and they realize who she is. Penny drops. And as she's regenerating, Rory starts to say something, and this is such a River Song line. She says, "Shut up, Dad. I'm focusing on a dress size."
Right.
And she has the instant fashion obsession. She's got to go weigh herself.
Yep.
Yeah.
She apparently off-screen admires her legs and says, "I'm going to wear lots of jodhpurs," which are those horse riding pants.
Right.
She also, at one point, shortly after regenerating, she's talking about how mature she is now. And she puts up her leg on a piece of something or other and says, "Hello, Benjamin." And the Doctor is like, "Who's Benjamin?" And that's a reference to the movie The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because Mrs. Robinson in that is mature, but is going after a younger man.
Right.
And I think there's a reference somewhere in a TV story to someone calling a River Song Mrs. Robinson, because she's more mature than the 10th Doctor is physically.
Right.
We get the return of the Doctor's mental flashbacks where we play stuff backwards and see things from his perspective, which is alien, and thus he's aware of things we couldn't be. And so we see this is part of their flirty kill the Doctor sequence where she's gotten a gun from a chair. So in flashback, we see the doctor remove the bullets from the gun first. And then she goes for another gun that's in a dish of fruit. And so the doctor in flashback rotates the dish of fruit, so she grabs a banana instead. And then she tries to use a letter opener, but he's got a solution for that. She tries to use the other gun, but he's pulled the clip out of that. And finally, she gets him with the lipstick. Mm-hmm. Then, as she's beginning her shopping spree, so-called, she hops out of the window onto the street below. There's a whole bunch of Nazis there. And she's got a really funny line. She says, I was just going to a gay gypsy bar mitzvah for the disabled when I thought, the Third Reich is a bit rubbish. I think I'll kill the Fuhrer. Who's with me?
That was a good one. That was a good one.
Yep.
At which point they shoot her, and then she uses regeneration energy to overcome all of them, thus showing us this is important because it sets us up for what she's going to do at the end of the episode. She's still cooking. In the 10th Doctor's phrase, her regeneration is not finished and stable yet, so she can still draw on that regeneration energy.
Right.
Also, she's got a great line as she's in the restaurant trying on clothes, and the Tesselecta is there in the form of Amy, and she says to the Tesselecta, I might take the age down just a little, gradually, to freak people out. And this is a reference. This is a reference to the fact that when we've seen River in the 10th Doctor's time, she was a younger actress.
Right.
And so I'll just take the age down just a little bit gradually to freak people out, to cover all of the prior appearances of River. This episode has really moving stuff. Not everything in it is sterling, but it's a really moving, effective episode. It ties up tons of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
For the kind of continuity plot geek that I am, I really like it. One thing I found interesting is when she wakes up in the hospital in the 52nd century, Amy and Rory are leaning over the camera, and Amy says, "Hey," and River says, "Hey," back. And this was interesting to me. They've also greeted each other with "hey" earlier in the episode. Now, this is interesting to me because "hey" has changed its roles in its cultural nuances in the last 70 years. If you go back, I remember watching an episode of the Andy Griffith Show from the early 1960s, and the characters had a running gag about the word "hey." It was like, tell Goober "hey," and tell this person "hey," and tell this person "hey. And it was clear to me as a child when I was watching this is supposed to be a joke. Right. They're treating "hey" as if it's atypical. And for me, growing up in the South, "hey" was totally typical. Mm-hmm. But apparently it was not as culturally widespread as it is now. And so in the time since that episode of the Andy Griffith Show was filmed, it has not just become mainstream in American English, but it's become mainstream in British English to the point that it can be used as a touching greeting when someone is waking up in a hospital bed after a life-threatening experience, and be meant absolutely seriously.
I seem to recall, like, when in some Clara episodes, she kind of there's a few tender moments, which is like, "Hey, you," that sort of that tender, greeting. I never really thought about it like that, but like, "Hey," it is kind of a weird affectation to to say "hey" as a hi.
Well, no, to me it is a totally normal thing to do. It only is perceived as a weird affectation by people who didn't grow up in the same environment with it.
Right.
Also, a nice thing, the Doctor gives River Song, or leaves on her bedside desk, the diary. So we now know where she got her diary.
Right. She got it from him. And this is the beginning of that. And so this is where we got a lot of answers here about River, her origins, who she is. Like you said, Jimmy, there's a lot of answers that come up, and some new ones that are raised, like the oldest question in the universe and that sort of thing, which we'll have answered, say, at the end of the season. But I agree. I like this episode, even as sometimes it was a bit confusing. The dialogue, the writing, there's some really great snappy lines, and like I said, I like the Tesselecta as a concept. and
yeah.
River is always fun.
I think those are the two areas where Stephen Moffat does the best as a writer. It's dialogue and concept, not always with plot, but dialogue and concept he does really well.
That's a good point.
Well, it seems like he gets caught up so much in these concepts and the dialogue that he kind of forgets we have to actually tell a story, and the story's got to go a certain way.
Right.
And needs to make sense.
He also does a bad job of killing people, but that's a whole nother...
Including Hitler. He couldn't even kill Hitler in the title episode called Let's Kill Hitler.
That's true. That's true. All right. I mean, it's a classic time travel, conundrum, right? If you're going to time travel, you go and kill Hitler. That's what everybody thinks. In fact, I think there was actually a great science fiction short story.
There's been a lot.
There was one that was where the characters like there was a time travel agency whose job was to protect Hitler, because everyone who gets time travel ability, suddenly the first thing they want to do is go back and kill Hitler, so they have to protect him to protect the timeline. And so it's this bizarre story about protecting Hitler from time travelers. So anyway, I think it should wrap it up for this time. Let's take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Jeff M., Richard H., Michael F., Jonathan R., and Father Andrew. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. Now's a great time to become a StarQuest patron, thanks to a generous gift from a StarQuest supporter. When you start a new Patreon monthly pledge at sqpn.com/give, the first 3 months will be matched by an equal amount from our donor to support all our shows, including this one, which makes your gift go even further. We're more than halfway to our goal of $2,000 in new monthly pledges, so won't you help us close the gap? If you've been thinking of becoming a StarQuest patron, now's the time. Visit sqpn.com/give today. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. What do you think of this episode, the Let's Kill Hitler? You can let us know by commenting at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the beginning of the Sixth Doctor's season-long The Trial of a Time Lord with The Mysterious Planet. Until then, Father Cory Stiga, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Oh, hey, and thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, Rule 1, the Doctor lies.
Right. This is going to be fun.